I guess we're all set to get going here. Just for, I know there isn't much on here tonight, but fair's coming up, so if any position you can help out, be great. I guess Richmond's got something to say. Are you gonna do that? Okay, all right. All right, I guess Andrew, you can take away with it.
Alrighty. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Andrew Greene. I am the Director of Sales for the East Broad Top Railroad in Rock Hill Furnace, Pennsylvania. Here to give you kind of a little bit of everything going on right now with the EBT. You'll learn a little bit about the history. So, a little reminder for those of you who might already know, for those who might not know, you'll learn a little bit. And then we'll talk about some of the ways the railroad has been preserved over the past almost 70 years now at this point, including what we're up to now, 5 to 6 years into ownership of the EBT. So, for those who are unaware, but this is always a quote that I like to include on any presentation about the EBT. And this comes from a study done kind of in tandem with the Department of the Interior, National Park Service, as well as the Smithsonian Institution, where William Bethune, this transportation curator, saying, the East Broad Top has been described as an incomparable national treasure, comprising a site, a set of historic buildings and facilities, a community, and a spirit that are taken together, unique in this country. Nowhere in North America does such a complete and original industrial historic site exist. The East Broad Top is the best remaining example in the nation of a regional narrow gauge railroad system. The EBT probably offers the only opportunity in the nation to tell a comprehensive railroad industry story. And that's something that we take to heart. We realize that we have something that truly is a national treasure, and it's something that needs to be preserved and continues to be preserved, not only by operating trains and restoring the buildings, but being able to tell the story and make sure people aware of our little narrow gauge railroad here in the hills of South Central PA. So, what is the East Broad Top? Again, I'm probably preaching to the choir for a number of you here, but for those who might want a little bit more, we are the last original narrow gauge railroad east of the Colorado Rockies, and we are the oldest narrow gauge railroad still operating in the United States. We're certainly the last one remaining east of the Rockies, operating its original location. We are home to the largest and most complete belt-driven machine shop complex in the United States. And since 1964, we have been a National Historic Landmark, and we are on the National Register of Historic Places. The main line of the railroad runs 33 miles from Mount Union with connection with the Pennsylvania Railroad, down through our headquarters in Rock Hill Furnace in Robertsdale, through the small communities of Three Springs, Saltillo, and then up the east side of the Broad Top Mountain, hence the name, up to the company town of Robertsdale, Woodvale, and Alvin to reach the coal fields up there. About 20 or so miles of branch lines were built, trying to reach different areas, but in total, 33 miles of main line here in the mountains. So what caused this to be built? The main reason was iron. So Juniata iron is one of the first regions in the country that really had a good industrial presence. And in Huntingdon County and the surrounding counties, this idea of Juniata iron peaked in the middle of the 19th century. You had basically two different commodities happening. You had the iron, and then you had coal. Iron itself needs a heat source, and in the hills around Rock Hill Furnace in Orbazonia, you now are on the fifth growth of timber. The first three were cut down for iron making. Iron was plentiful in the area, it still is, and you needed a way to heat it up to be able to then melt it down into pig iron, and then you can create what you need to from there. So originally, they just logged the hills out around modern day Orbazonia, and then they realized soon after that, okay, we're starting to run low on wood. We need a more reliable heat source. And about 20 miles away on the east side of a large flat plateau in the mountains called the Broad Top, they discovered semi-bituminous coal, kind of a mixture of anthracite and bituminous, mixture of hard and soft coal that was very good for industrial use, didn't smoke very much, and produced a good amount of heat. So, of course, your problem was transportation. How do you get it from one place to another, not only to heat your homes, but to be used in this iron making process? And over time, more and more transportation networks started to make their way to our region in central Pennsylvania, notably the Pennsylvania Railroad in 1850. And then reaching the west side of the Broad Top Mountain was the Huntingdon and Broad Top. But the iron industry in Huntingdon County was more or less overlooked. So in 1856, local businessmen got together with financiers and chartered the East Broad Top Railroad and Coal Company. However, due to the Civil War and a lack of funds, construction was halted. They didn't put down a single mile of track. Construction was begun in 1872 with the same charter renewed, and they decided that they would route the railroad from Mount Union south, connecting those iron industries with the coal fields, and reach the Broad Top Mountain by 1874. The railroad, for its most part, for the first 30 years, was just a conveyor belt. They would run their empty trains up to Robertsdale, which was the company mining town. They would bring the coal down to the Rock Hill Iron Furnace. They would, using their branch lines, bring in iron ore from the communities around Rock Hill and Orbizonia. And once you combine them all together and you have your finished product, you would ship out the pig iron to market to the Pennsylvania Railroad and Mount Union. And you could see in this image, which comes from our archives and special collections, the Rock Hill Iron Furnace about the mid 1880s to 1890s. It was a very large complex for its time. And the railroad was quite profitable and did a great job of moving product around for those first 30 years. But by the turn of the century, Pittsburgh surpassed the Juniata region in iron and steel production, and the Rock Hill Iron Furnace closed in 1908. So the railroad needed a new source of something to do. So with that, the EBT transitioned primarily to transporting coal, modernizing every aspect of the operations by the 1920s. A lot of this got started by one of our presidents. His name was Robert Siebert. Siebert had gotten his start at the EBT in 1874 as a telegraph operator up at Mount Union, and had made his fortune and career by heading west, working for railroads like the Ashland's Peak and Santa Fe, and ended up coming back to the EBT as the president of both the railroad and the Associated Coal Company in 1903. And his mentality more or less was, I run a big railroad out west. I'm going to treat my little railroad like a big railroad. And that then immediately began a bunch of modernization efforts, which included upgrading the track with heavier rail, replacing or renewing bridges to be much stronger, beginning to make modern steel freight cars and replacing their wood fleet of cars, and of course, a new fleet of powerful steam locomotives, primarily Mikados, which the EBT is known for. The railroad's machine shop facility was completely state-of-the-art by about the mid-1910s. And over its lifetime, the EBT hauled over 33 million tons of freight. 94% of it was coal, ore, or stone. And you can see in this image here, that's taken up by the Mine 5 tipple up in Robertsdale of empties coming in and the loads being made with one of our Mikados in the 1940s. Now, the other industry that really fueled the EBT was the brick plants. And up in Mount Union, which got its nickname to become Bricktown, USA, were three different refractory brick plants. And with them, you need two primary commodities to make your brick. The first is coal, which the EBT had plenty of and easy to transport. They'd already been doing that for decades. The second was a white powdery rock called ganister. It's a type of silica brick or silica rock that is found in Jack's Mountain, which happens to parallel the railroad, basically from Mount Union all the way down to Saltillo. And the brick plants all needed those commodities, and the railroad became the lifeline for those brick plants. So the brick was used for the actual the silica brick for the inside of these blast furnaces. So the railroad had its big customers that it would serve on a regular basis. Mount Union itself was the largest producer of refractory brick in the world for over 70 years. If you go down pretty much anywhere in town today, you'll see evidence of the brick plant making. Even if you go kayaking down the Juniata River, which parallels Mount Union, you will find refractory brick just dumped into the river in some places. And of course, the EBT was the main one to transport them in. And they were the last major customers of the railroad going into the 1950s. By late 1955, the market for broadtop coal had dwindled. And with these refractory brick plants either closing or switching over to other fuels for their processes, either natural gas or oil, there was really no purpose for the railroad to continue operating. So the EBT applied to the Interstate Commerce Commission to abandon the line, which was granted in March of 1956. And on April 6, 1956, the last narrow gauge train ran its mainline train, which was just getting some loads of scrap and the last 10 loads of Ganister rocks for brick plants in Mount Union out of Saltillo, hauled by engine number 17, which you can see in the bottom photo. 17 and her sisters were parked in the roundhouse, and the shop employees locked the doors and went home, marking the end of 84 years of common carrier rail service. And the top right image I'll show you here is from Mine 5 with a lot of the workers in the 1940s. This was the lifeline of our community here was coal, iron, and brick making. So that should have been the end of the railroad. What we should be talking about now is how a parking structure could be for a Dollar General in Orbizonia and Rock Hill Furnace, for all intents and purposes. However, fate stepped in. In April of 1956, Nicholas Kovalchick, the head of Kovalchick Salvage Company, purchased the EBT. The story goes that he went to 13 different banks and got the money for the down payment and ended up with the East Broad Top Railroad and Coal Company, as well as the Rock Hill Iron and Coal Company, which by that point was known as the Rock Hill Coal Company. And for whatever reason, Nick decided not to scrap the railroad. Depending on what source you hear, the family likes to tell two different stories. The first story goes something akin to, as a kid, Nick always wanted his own toy train set. And for a while, he did odd jobs, helped out neighbors, scrapped together the money, and ended up giving it to his brother named Joe to go down to Sears and Roebuck and purchase himself a model train set. Well, his brother pocketed the money and he never got it. So he always had this longing for a toy train. And now ending up with a 3-foot narrow gauge railroad, he had his toy train. The second story goes, again, take this with a grain of salt. I'm just repeating what the Kovalchick family tells, is that when he came down to look at what he purchased, he went inside the roundhouse and he heard the engines crying, whimpering, all afraid. And he goes in and he hears engine number 12 saying, "Oh no, this is the junk man. This is the scrapper. He's here to cut us up. And because I'm the smallest and oldest, I'm going to be cut up first." And all the engines start quaking in fear. Again, this is the story the family tells. Roll with me on this. Nick apparently responds, "Whoa, I am the scrapper. But I promise as long as I live, I will never put a torch to any of you. And I hope to see you back on the rails shortly." Well, the railroad sleeps for 4 years. In 1960, the twin boroughs of Rock Hill Furnace and Orbizonia are celebrating their bicentennial, and they ask Mr. Kovalchick if he can bring a train out on display to be part of their annual homecoming celebration, just something for the parade to go past. And Nick says, "I'll do you one better." He fired up locomotives 12 and 15, got out some of the old passenger equipment, converted a couple of freight cars into passenger service, and decided to run the railroad for the community as a gift to them, and of course make a little bit of money on the side. And it was so successful that for the next 51 years, the Kovalchick family ran the East Broad Top as a summer tourist operation, running from our headquarters of Rock Hill, Orbizonia, about 4.5 miles north up to Colgate Grove and back. And under his leadership and then his son Joe's leadership, the EBT was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1964, placed on the National Register of Historic Places, and his son Joe kept the family tradition going up until about 2011 or so. And you could see some photos. The top left is of Nick Kovalchick and his wife Fanny in 1964. You could see his son Joe on the right. That was taken last year when we made a monument to the Kovalchick family using one of the old locomotive drivers that was no longer in use. And a picture of the Kovalchick family. And then the bottom right corner is from 1964 when the EBT was designated the National Historic Landmark, featuring Joe Kovalchick, Fanny Kovalchick, Nick Kovalchick, and on the far right, C.R. Wilburn, who was the longtime operating vice president of the East Broad Top, both in the common carrier era and in the tourist era. Around this same time, Railways to Rest Yesterday, the Rock Hill Trolley Museum gets formed and begins rebuilding about 1.5 miles of track on the Shade Gap branch, which had been abandoned by the EBT in the late 1940s for electric trolley car use. Around 1983, the Friends of the East Broad Top is formed primarily to preserve the railroad's history, equipment, and structures. They originally started off as a fan group just to kind of model the railroad and document it for fun, but they realized about a few years later that if they actually didn't step in to help the railroad, there would be no railroad to model. So they've been a huge instrumental part of our legacy, and over the past few years have raised more than $2 million that has been reinvested into the railroad and have given thousands upon thousands of hours of volunteer labor and time to help us. And due to the increasing costs and responsibilities of operating and maintaining a historic railroad, the Kovalchicks decided to close the railroad in December of 2011. And you can see a couple of photos here. These were taken by the railroad's official photographer, Matthew Malkowitz. This one was from one of the last regular revenue runs in October of 2011, when the EBT was surprised with a surprise blizzard. And he got some striking images of that operation. This is taken near Enyart Road, just about a mile north of town here. So the railroad shuts down again. And for 9 years, the EBT sits idle. The Kovalchick family is trying to find someone that can take care of the place. They realize that they love this place. This has become their family legacy, not the scrapping operation, the EBT. And they want to find a caretaker that can honor their family legacy, take care of it, be able to do the fundraising, the initiatives to keep this place around and make it bigger and better than it was before. So they keep searching and searching. And meanwhile, the Friends of the East Broadtop continue restoring the railroad shop complex and historic car fleet, all with a nod of, we don't know if it'll ever come back, but we're going to keep the hinges from squeaking and keep the buildings from falling into each other until that time comes. And this shot was taken, I think 2014 or 2015. You can see the right of ways getting very much covered up by the weeds by this point. Enter the EBT Foundation in 2020. So the EBT Foundation gets started by our general manager, Brad Esposito, who met with a number of railroad industrial professionals, namely people like Henry Posner III of Railroad Development Corporation, Wick Moorman, who is, of course, the former CEO of Norfolk Southern and president of Amtrak, Bennett Levin, who many of you might know is the owner of several E-units with the Juniata Terminal Railroad. They've all had major careers in railroading and railroad preservation. And they all came together with longtime EBT volunteers and staff to purchase the railroad from the Kovalchicks and begin restoring the railroad, bringing it back to its former glory and even more. And with that, our revival officially began. And let's see. Here's an image of what the railroad is up to now. We've come quite a ways from looking like overgrown weeds. And this is a shot here of our board from a few years ago, the first time that we were able to safely bring a train back to Colgate Grove since 2011. And this is featuring the EBT's gas electric motor car, the M1, which is celebrating its centenary this year. It was built in 1926 inside the railroad's machine shop complex, using parts from J.G. Brill and Westinghouse Company. Pulling behind it, the Orbizonia parlor car, which was President Siebert's private car that got to the EBT about 1907 or so, originally from the Bradford, Bordell, and Kinzoo Railroad. And with the EBT Foundation, our mission is to preserve and protect the East Broadtop Railroad National Historic Landmark, educate visitors about the railroad in local and national history, entertain visitors with world-class experience, and promote economic growth locally and regionally. And that's something we take very seriously and try to bring to heart every day that we open the doors. Of course, a major part of that as well is the Friends of the East Broadtop. As we've talked about, the Friends have been a major, major part of our restoration efforts. You can't talk about the EBT without talking about the Friends. They are an all-volunteer organization, well over 2,000 members now, that do everything from going to train shows to give out brochures, to coming in 2 to 3 days a week to help with track work, to building restoration, freight car restoration, passenger car restoration. They fund our archives and special collections program. And as I said, they have over the past 5 years raised over $2 million that has all been reinvested into what the EBT has been doing. And I encourage all of you, if you're not already a member of the Friends of the East Broadtop, consider joining. They have a quarterly newsletter that's an award-winning newsletter, the Timber Transfer. They have a monthly campaign that they send out of emails letting you know, hey, here's our newsletter of what's currently going on restoration-wise, upcoming activities, what have the volunteers been up to, that sort of thing. And it lets you get your hands dirty down in Rock Hill Furnace as well and up at Robertsdale. So definitely consider that. The Friends are an incredible organization. We could not do what we're doing without them. As I said, 200 members. Their mission is committed to the mission of preservation, restoration, and interpretation of the East Broadtop National Historic Landmark. So where are we now? So since the early 2000s, the Freds have been more or less keeping the buildings alive in Rock Hill Furnace. They have been doing everything from replacing roofs to making sure the machine shop complex, everything's still oiled and functioning. They've been literally lifting buildings off their non-existent foundations to putting foundations underneath them. And they've been restoring them as funds and volunteer labor allow. And it allows us to take tours through them every day that we're open. A few years ago, we committed to installing a fire suppression system, which has been a multi-year restoration project that is now complete. The idea being that, God forbid, a fire ever happened in our original world-class machine shop complex, we have a reservoir big enough to with the system to keep all of the flames at bay until something else comes down here. But we want to keep this thing around because we know how special it is. The overall goal of our restoration is to prevent any further degradation of the facilities and return it to its common carrier appearance through tours and demonstrations. Recently, we actually had a group from the Friends called the Young East, or not Young Easties, the Next Gen Easties. It's our 18 to 35 group that have been working inside the blacksmith shop, and they just got a couple of the belt driven machines in there hooked up, and they now have a 100-pound steam hammer and another reciprocating saw now working. They've been working on actually making the forges in there functional so we can do blacksmithing demonstrations safely. There's a lot going on down here, or trip back down to see what's going on. Obviously, the big people are talking about now is track restoration. So for almost the railroad operated exclusively on Rock Hill Furnace, or about milepost 10.8, Colgate Grove 7.5. The foundation was 27 and a half miles, the original 33. South end, the Alwick Bridge, up to the end of track at Alvin. And everything just sat in ground. It was never scrapped, never torn up. Mother just took over. And it just has a and rocks and debris. The ties are mulch. The plates are still there. The spikes are there in many cases. Just sitting engaged and not engaged 27 and a half miles. So we restored the railroad up to Colgate Grove first to begin doing that. And then we focused heading south. So our current operational goal is to get back to the community of Saltillo, which is about 8 miles away, 8 to 9 miles away from Rock Hill Furnace. And as of today, they have completely restored the track from Orbizonia down to the north end, the railroad north end of Pogue Bridge, which is about 2.5 miles. And we currently do excursions down to that end of track 2 to 3 days a month. We'll do that. And then the volunteers have been down in Saltillo with our 2 full-time track crew members, and they have completely laid out the station siding, the main line up until about the station. The narco switch has been put in, and I think the update today was they put down another 250 feet of track, both spiking it down in some places and completely engaged, to some places just have the rails reconnected and are waiting to be spiked in. So that is currently what's going on. You could see kind of in green, that's our active track. The red track is stuff that we are working to get to, and orange is brush cleared. So we have the track ready and graded from the Pogue Bridge to the end of the Pogue siding down to Price's Bridge. And then in Saltillo, we have the right-of-way cleared heading railroad north, a fair distance heading almost all the way to Three Springs. And we're working on getting some grants together to get the rest of the track between the two cleared so we can get that track rebuilt. So the first step of that was, of course, getting rid of the overgrowth. And you could see an image from 2021 on the right here, featuring our general manager, Brad Esposito, on the right, and our director of engineering, James Roslin, on the left. This is at Jordan Summit. This is the top of the ruling grade heading north from Saltillo. And that's what it looked like in 2021. Everyone had been dumping their tires in there. The weeds had gotten crazy, thickets, trees, you name it. So we had to remove the rail, remove all the brush, repair all the fills and cuts, complete ditch work to facilitate proper drainage. We put the rail off to the side or moved it out of the way, stored while the grade is leveled and prepared for ties. And then our full-time track crew, along with the FEBT volunteers, come in, they'll lay the ties, place the rail, set everything in the proper gauge, spike everything, and then we come through with dumping ballast, and we actually have a narrow gauge tamper and a ballast regulator that allows us to level and align the track. And you can see that end result on that image from 2025. We were able to successfully run our first train south of the Jordan Summit Trestle or Jordan Summit Overpass on July 3rd, 2025, and we've been ran public excursions down there starting July 4th, 2025. Other infrastructure, of course, is 8 grade crossings. We have 8 between Rock Hill and Saltillo, 5 bridges, and a whole bunch of culverts. The shot on the right here is from our crossing at US 475, or sorry, PA 475. And for those of you who might have visited the railroad pre-2011, you'll know that they had cleared a bit of the track heading south from town for speeder use. And the tracks kind of dodged tree stumps in the way. They went through people's backyards, if you thought about that. And there was a giant wall of brush that stopped right here at 475. And so you could see that's what we had to deal with before. And we worked with PennDOT, we worked with local leadership to complete plans for all the highway crossings to be reactivated. And as of today, we have 5 of those crossings of 8 completely rehabilitated in 2024 and 2025. And as I said, we run our steam engine, our M1, whatever trains we need to heading south fairly regularly down there. And we will continue to expand those operations in the coming years. So this continued down 2.5 miles, and now we are in front of the Southern Huntington County High School as of July of 2025. So now we can run the excursions down there. The high school itself was built in the 1960s after the EBT ceased common carrier operations. And the first train that we ran down there carried local dignitaries, board members from the school, railroad staff, and our volunteers. And we have now been able to do events like the Take the Train to School Day. So we are the only railroad that I'm aware of that replaces school buses at least 2 days a year. And we become the shuttle for the high school students to get to school. And there's also an elementary school that's currently using the high school space. So we take the elementary schools to school as well. And that's been a big success for us and for the community. And it's something we're very happy of. There's also a funny story I'll tell about the school. That's sort of a legendary story with the railroad. So after the EBT ceased operations, everyone assumed in the 1950s that, okay, the railroad's abandoned and it'll never come back again. And they started looking at building Southern Huntington County High School. And they originally wanted to put it more or less where our apprentice truck is in the top photo. And almost as a thing out of spite, the railroad ran the M1 down in front of where the high school would be and parked it there for a little bit just to prove to the town that the track was still usable. We just don't run trains on it regularly, but we can run a train whenever we want. And that more or less forced the county to move the school back a couple hundred yards to where it is now. So we're thankful that that went through because now we're able to actually continue running our trains down there. And it's a very nice trip and we can't wait to go even further. So what's next? Pogue Bridge. That is the current focus. It's our largest trestle. It's located immediately south of the high school. We are currently waiting for the last of our bid scopes to be approved by the Department of the Interior. And we're using Saving America's Treasures Grant and a Pennsylvania RACP grant to fund this. So hopefully in the near future that gets signed off. And then we will be able to rebuild the trestle and have our contractors get the trains back up and running over this historic structure. Several smaller bridges are in the way as well. Kyler's Bridge, Price's Bridge, and the Three Springs Bridge. Thankfully, those have been in more or less good shape. The one in Three Springs does need some work, but Price and Kyler's bridges are structurally sound. It's like finding everything in like an old car in a barn. For sitting for 70 years, everything's in pretty daggone good shape, and we're lucky it hasn't gotten any worse. But these are in very good shape. We have, of course, had to clear and grade the initial 4.5 miles to get to Saltillo from where we are now. And some progress has been made on that and will continue to be made on that. As of right now, the top image, which is Price's Bridge, they've cleared the right of way and they've graded it up to that bridge. And then the bottom image is actually looking, I believe that's Railroad North out of Saltillo, past the corner out of town. So they have been clearing the right of way and getting it ready for us to get back to Saltillo here. A huge goal of this, of course, is to become a catalyst of economic growth for the communities. If you've been to Huntington County, you know that we are not metropolis. We are a fairly rural community, economically depressed, that once the railroad and mining died out, the communities have more or less slumbered since then. There's a lot of agriculture. There's still some mining in the area, but for the most part, it's rural agricultural based, and people will commute to work, further away. But we realized that people want to take a longer train ride when they come to see us. They've done the route to Colgate Grove. They want to see something different. And we know that the moment the railroad can operate to Three Springs, Saltillo, et cetera, that's going to bring a lot of money in from tourist dollars into the towns and help revitalize that. So with that, the Friends of the East Broad Top funded the construction of the Saltillo station, which was raised in the early 2000s. And that is our current goal to bring trains to. The original structure was unfortunately torn down in 2004. It had been not maintained and was in danger of collapsing and becoming a hazard for the community. The Friends went in, documented the entire structure, took out as much artifacts as they could that was safe to remove, and then they just held on to it, hoping for the day that they might be able to put them back in place. And sure enough, the station has become a real thing again, and they have finished, for the most part, a lot of the exterior work. They're currently working on the interior, and that'll be our new passenger terminus once we head back to Saltillo, hopefully in the next few years. And you can see another historic structure on the right, the La Palace Hotel, which is off to the right on that bottom of the image. So that's becoming the starting point for economic growth and community. And we look forward to using the structure with the towns, not only as a railroad station, but as a community gathering spot. And we're eager to see what can happen. And again, you can see the difference from 1955, when the railroad was about to shut down with one of the coal drags heading north, back towards Rock Hill Furnace and Mount Union, and today. So we're very excited. Of course, with the expansion of train service and increased demand, means that we need to keep working on our locomotive fleet. Currently, number 16 is our operable steam locomotive. We got that back in operation in 2023. The locomotive had sat disused since 1956, and was deemed to be the best candidate at the time for restoration. It spent 2.5 years working on that, got the engine back up and running, and has been a reliable steamer ever since. They are currently working on number 15, and we will continue to ramp up that work to get number 15 back in service. 15 was the last operable locomotive under Kovalchick ownership, last running in 2011. And the plan is once 15 is done, 14 will follow. The lucky thing for us is 15 and 14 more or less are the same engine. Of course, there's some differences in the piping, some mechanical upgrades that the railroad did over time, but you're talking about the same Baldwin building drawings. So if you need to work on the drivers, we actually ordered 2 brand new sets of drivers, one for 14 and one for 15. And hopefully the work we do with 15 can be duplicated and used on the 14 wherever possible to speed up that restoration. Now, the EBT owns 6 original wooden coaches. They are in various stages of repair, restoration, or just being cocooned for now. The Friends of the East Broad Top are restoring Combine number 14. The EBT Foundation is working on Coach 8 and the presidential car number 20. The Friends are also evaluating in the future what they might be able to do with some of the other rolling stock fleet we have. And the idea is once those cars are back in service, they're going to be used for occasional use and for charters and big events. We ordered 4 brand new coaches that appeared in 2022 and 2023. They were all steel construction with roller bearings, steel frames, whereas these cars were built in 1881, 1882. And they were designed to run for 40 years, and now they're 140 years old. So we're going to restore them, get them running like new, but only use them sparingly to keep them in good shape for the future. And it is hoped that Combine 14 can enter revenue service here sometime in the next few months to year, with other cars hopefully following after that point. And we're hoping that because of this expansion, we're going to need more passenger cars. So what happens beyond Saltillo? That when we can start running, it'll have some of the best views on the East Coast. So from Saltillo, the grade begins grade up through side tunnels to reach the coal. Tunnels are primary obstacles go through. And while we do not have a time of when we will be running a train to Robertsdale, it is goal to bring trains back to Robert. So, hell or water, we're going to find a way. It might take us to find a way to get those. See up top, that is the believe that's the Sideline Hill Tunnel. And then inside is actually a LiDAR scan of the Ray Tunnel. We actually took drones did LiDAR scanning, so we know exactly of the tunnels and what it would take to restore them. Up in Robertsdale, the Friends of the East Broad Top are actually waiting for us. They have a comprehensive museum operating there in the company square, which is dedicated to the EBT's railroad and mining history. You can take a tour through the museum, which is located in the old post office. You can take a coal mine tour, walking tour through the coal mining relics, and take a rail bike along roughly 2 miles of the EBT main line. That main line is spiked and gauged, but is not real steam engine worthy, but it's light enough that you can take a handcar, speeder, or a rail bike up into some really pretty views when you get up to that end of the railroad. Just down the street is the Broad Top Area Coal Miners Museum. They operate a museum that talks about the coal mining history and the story of the people. It's definitely worth a visit if you've not made the trip up there. Again, highly recommended. If you're coming to visit the EBT, make sure to stop up there. That museum is open on Saturdays when the EBT is running. So, what happens then? Well, the restoration of the EBT to Robertsdale is going to be, of course, a nostalgic ride to the past, but we know that it's going to be one heck of a pretty trip once we can actually run that up there. And while Pennsylvania is definitely loaded with opportunities for train excursions, you have everything from the Reading and Northern to Strasburg to the Everett to EBT to, insert this railroad here. There's 15 or 16 of us in the state. We believe that we have one of the prettiest railroads out there. And once we actually can restore train service, it'll be quite the experience and bring people from all over. Robertsdale itself looks just like it did back in the 1950s. When the railroad shut down, the town basically went to sleep. All the buildings looked like they were straight out of the company town. Company houses are there. The coal mine remnants are there. And we want to let people take their train ride heading railroad south, get to Robertsdale, and be able to step back in time to experience when coal was king, life was simpler, and the railroad was the way to get to and from where you need to go. With that as well, we're trying to, of course, focus on educating the public about the history of the railroad and what the railroad did. And one of the big things that we're very blessed is the EBT still has all the original paperwork. When the railroad shut down, the railroad did have a company office in Philadelphia. All of those books, including the board of directors minutes, the vouchers, the ledgers, you name it, all were sent from Philadelphia to Rock Hill. And then when the mine shut down in Robertsdale, all of those materials were also sent into the mine, into the vaults in our station. The station contains over 5,000 linear feet of material, bound volumes, maps and drawings, organizational records, company, employee records, and more. And so far, they've digitized, actually, this number's out of date, it's over 5,000 pieces of material that can be accessed by researchers online. And we've partnered with Juniata College to provide internships for our archives program, as well as providing materials for a guidebook produced by the Juniata College students that has become our official guidebook. And we try to put on presentations wherever we can to, show what's in the archives and what's going on. And you can see our archivist, Julie Feather, working inside the vaults. Her crew has done an incredible job uncovering a lot of really cool stuff. And one of my favorite things is when Julie comes over and says, "Hey, I've got something to show you." And it completely derails whatever we are doing in the office, because then we can go look at an old map from the 1890s to discover a branch line that was never built, but we were trying to figure out where the heck they were trying to build it, or uncovering the original sales agreements and paperwork for the M1. Or other things. So it's been really, really great. And if you haven't already gone on to see the archives page on our website, do so. You'll see a lot of incredible documents there. We've also worked to develop a state-approved curriculum for K to 6th grade that complements field trips to the EBT. We try to bring between 1,000 to 3,000 students a year to come ride our trains. So when the teachers come in, We send them an education guide that has basically a teacher's reference to how do you teach the railroad, student activities, an activity book for when the kids are here, try to prepare them for their visit. And then when they're here, we take them through the original belt-driven machine shop complex. We take them inside the roundhouse to see the steam engines. We put them on a ride. And it's something that we really value doing, and we know that we need to keep doing to keep kids interested, not only in steam trains are cool, but also here's the region's heritage. Here's why we're here, why this is so important, not only for local history, but for national history. And we really try to grow that every year, and it has been growing year over year. We've also partnered with a lot of local school districts to provide mandatory volunteer hours for students to fill graduation requirements. So they volunteer at our special events. And as I mentioned before, twice a year, we do our Take the Train to School days to provide all the students of Southern Huntington County schools with the opportunity to ride a steam locomotive or steam train to school one day, which is currently the only location in the US where this is possible as far as we are aware. And that image down there is from October of last year. We took over 350 kids to school on one trip, had the marching band in the flat car behind the steam engine, and they were playing their school songs and cheers while riding behind a 1916 steam locomotive, really hauling downhill, up and downhill, trying to get everyone down. It was quite a ride, and we look forward to doing that every year. With that too, with partnerships with the Friends now have a program called Young Easties, which is a student volunteer program aimed for ages 13 to 18 that allows that next generation to get hand-on experience here in Rock Hill. And we firmly believe that we need to get this next generation interested at a young age because, let's face it, a lot of people in the railroading world are getting up there in age. So if we can get young people interested now, and maybe not all of them go to work on a tourist railroad, but they're going to be appreciative of what they can do. Some of them might become a welder, a machinist, a carpenter, someone who's a general laborer. Maybe they want to become the next marketing guy at a railroad. Maybe they want to be an archivist someday. Whatever their interest might be, we're trying to get them interested at a young age. And we've already had several of those kids go on to do rail programs at Penn State Altoona and really get interested. And some of them, they've actually graduated to work at other railroads. So we're very proud of that program. We're continuing to get young people interested in real life railroading practices. And of course, we're always looking at new ways of continue our educational programming and outreach opportunities to try to reach a broader audience through technology, social media, whatever platforms we can do. You can see one of our interns from last year, Zoe, working on digitizing home movies of the railroad, reel-to-reel tapes, 8mm film, whatever we can to try to then digitize it, preserve it, and one day release to the public. So, of course, how can you get involved? Join the Friends of the East Broad Top, volunteer with the Friends, contribute to the foundation if you so wish. There are naming opportunities available, sponsoring miles of track, buildings, locomotives, cars, etc. We encourage you to follow us on social media, tell your friends and family about the Broad Top. And of course, come down, ride a train, take the tour, enjoy a special event, buy a souvenir. Every little bit that comes into the railroad is invested into keeping this thing alive. We've pulled the EBT successfully out of the grave twice. We don't want to have to do it a third time. So we encourage all of you to come down and visit us at some point. And to learn more, check out our website, eastbroadtop.com. Learn about the Friends. Their website is fept.org. Follow us on social media. Follow them on social media. And I just want to thank everyone for having me to talk to you a little bit about the Broad Top and what we're currently up to. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions if anyone has someone who wants to chime in. I don't know if anyone wants to moderate that or how we'd like to do that, but happy to answer any questions people have.
Anybody out in Zoom land or in the audience here want to ask Andrew any questions?
I got one.
Go ahead.
Since it was a very, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
Since this is a very good presentation on maintaining historic artifacts, I could be wrong here, but the East Broad Top once had a passenger coach that probably wound up on the Tweetsee.
That is still down there on the Tweetsee. They are doing a very good job of taking care of that car. Should they ever decide that they would like to repatriate it back home, we will welcome it with open arms. There's a few other cars that have made their way to other heritage railroads and tourist operations. There's a combine car over in New Jersey at the Pine Creek Railroad. We have a couple of cars that have migrated everywhere from Michigan to Colorado, and they've made their way back, and they're currently cocooned, waiting for the plan to restore them. And of course, if you go to any narrow gauge railroad throughout the U.S., there's a more than 50% chance that they have one of our hoppers. The hoppers they can keep. We have 250 of them. We don't need all 250 in the modern era. But the passenger fleet, we would love to bring home at some point in the future and get them back on the rails. And as I said, use them sparingly. But the goal is if somebody owns them right now and they're happy with them, we're glad that they're being maintained. So, but one day we would love to get them back if that was ever the opportunity.
Tweetsy might say no to bringing back the passenger coach to Rock Hill Furnace.
They might, but maybe we can work out a special deal one day where we can send them a couple of hoppers for a year and they can run a couple of unique trains on their line, and we can get the coach back for a few months, do a couple of special events, and then send it back. Think of like a visiting locomotive program with what Knott's Berry Farm has been doing with the Durango and Silverton for RGS 41 and the 340 with their restoration, or like the 315 with the Durango Railroad Historical Society. Maybe we could do something like that in the future to bring them back for a little bit, let them run, and then send them back to where their current ownership is. But who knows? The future is bright.
Considering a lease agreement.
Yep, who knows? A good question.
There, anybody else? Want to say something, Wayne? Anybody else out in Zoom land? Well, I guess with that being said, we'll see you guys again next month. Same time, same place, and a very good program, Andrew.
Yep, thank you very much for having me again. Hope to see you all down at the East Broad Top at some point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.